Yoel thought that the fight was 5 rounds, and one judge scored the fight for him, giving him a 29-28, one of the worst scorecards I've ever seen in my life, but very fitting for a Bellator main event. I mean, Yoel really didn't do much. I gave him no rounds in the fight, and there could have been an argument that Phil Davis won by 30-26. He became the statue of God again, and he might say the reason why he was so conservative for the whole fight was because he was expecting to explode in the 4th and 5th, which those rounds never came. I don't know if he really thought that the fight was 5 rounds. I have a feeling he's telling the truth, and if that's the case, how is that even possible? For the months of preparation, signing the contract to fight Phil Davis, just that alone should tell him that it's a 3-rounder. Talking to the organization, talking to his teammates, going through training camp, before the fight in the locker room where the ref is giving them instructions, inside the fight between each round. How did you all not know that this fight was 3 rounds? Unless they sabotaged him. Hey, I'm gonna put my tinfoil hat on, call up Eddie Bravo, because maybe this was a setup. No, I'm joking, but even in the corner, did they tell him, oh, you're gonna get him in the 4th and 5th or something? Because this has to be one of the weirdest main events I've ever seen. In terms of Yoel going into Bellator for the first time and really doing nothing in the fight, throwing some big counter shots here and there, winging punches, some kicks to the legs, nothing really major. He looked very similar to the way he fought Israel Adesanya. Maybe because he is fighting another very long opponent. Phil Davis has a big reach advantage. He's tall, he's a big guy, a true 205er. So maybe Yoel came into this fight with the same kind of approach that he came into the Izzy fight with, expecting Phil to fall into his counter punches, which is never a good game plan when you're fighting a longer fighter. Unless they are a fighter that is known to dig into their punches and throw their body at them, right? This is an example with Tony Ferguson versus Justin Gaethje. With his reach, he didn't really manage distance that well. Phil Davis managed distance perfectly. He kept Yoel at the end of the jab, which extended into the right hand, and the jab loaded up Yoel's hips as he tried to pull away from them, because Yoel did not really use footwork at all. In the beginning of the 3rd round, in the beginning of the 1st round was really when he started to move a little bit, but then he slowed down and started plodding all over the place, which made it even easier for Phil Davis to gauge the takedowns. Whenever Phil did get in close using his boxing, he dug in with the 1-2 or just the jab. He knew Yoel was looking to counter with big looping punches, so he used that to his advantage. Yoel explodes for the big counter knockout, and Phil goes on the hips, double legs him, gets him close to the cage, and then uses the cage to his advantage to keep sweeping Yoel out. And there are a lot of people making a big deal about, Yoel is a silver medalist in the Olympics back in the year 2000, I believe. That is true, but it's very different in the sport of MMA. And when punches or kicks play a part in the game and there's a cage, it's a completely different thing than freestyle wrestling, especially with the fact that Yoel Romero is a counterpuncher who explodes into everything he does. When he wants to deliver damage, he explodes in all of it. That makes it a lot easier for opponents to double leg him as a counter. They counter the counterpuncher, and by that, they're able to get it close to the cage, and the cage completely changes the landscape of wrestling. But Phil Davis looked wonderful. I mean, it was a very easy fight for him. All he did was throw 1-2s and a double leg. That's pretty much it. Some leg kicks here and there, but the jab was the biggest contributor for Phil Davis's success. I don't know about Yoel Romero's future. They could put him in some fun fights in Bellator. They could try his hand at heavyweight and fight some of the older guys like Fedor and them. Why not? They'll be a spectacle. But in terms of him competing against the top echelon of the Bellator fighters, I think he's too old for that. Even though he was very fast and powerful, he was getting off balance with his punches. His technique seems to be out the window, which is like the opposite of what happens with older fighters. Usually they get slower, the reflexes are slower, but their technique stays intact. With Yoel Romero, it's like the opposite happened. He still has his speed and power, but it's his technique that has kind of declined. Even though he hasn't been the most technical fighter in the world, he at least shows some things in the past against Luke Rockhold, Jacare Souza, against Chris Weidman. His timing was impeccable and all that stuff, but in this fight, he didn't have the timing down at all. His accuracy was completely off. His targeting was completely off. So all I like to see from Yoel is fun fights, or maybe just call it a career. I mean, he's 44 years old. His eye seems like it's getting worse for some reason. It could play a fact that he's probably not able to see some punches coming, and that could spell even more trouble for his future, because I don't want to enter the day where Yoel Romero is getting knocked out and slept by his opponents. That would be a disaster. He has not taken that much damage in his career, but weird main event, weird Bellator card as always, and I'll see you guys in the next video.